Republican Byron Donalds. Congressman, thank you for spending a few minutes with me here.
It's good to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Let me start with, I don't want to get into the specifics of the debt ceiling because we know it's the beginning of a negotiation. But I'm curious about your trust in Kevin McCarthy. If Speaker McCarthy and President Biden strike a compromise, are you going to support that deal if Kevin McCarthy comes to you and says, look, it's not what you wanted, but it's as good as I was going to get considering the circumstances. You trusted me with this. Do you trust him enough to take whatever deal he cuts with Biden?
Well, Chuck, let's make sure we get this question absolutely right. What has Joe Biden ever negotiated that it's actually worked out for the American people? I mean, you please tell me, because I've been observing his record up close for the last couple of years, and I've been observing politics for a long time. I mean, he's been here longer than I've been alive, and not that long, but I've watched enough. He's never really negotiated anything that's worked out for the American people. The last Iran deal wasn't a good deal for us. He was part of those negotiations. And look at what his American Rescue Plan did. Massive inflation unleashed on the American people. Obviously didn't work out for any American. So let's start there. Number two, more importantly, when they get into a room, what Kevin McCarthy has in his pocket is a prescription for actually getting America back on track. It's something that takes us to pre-pandemic spending levels, something that 75% of Americans think we should be doing since, the pandemic's over. So I want to actually see what happens before I bring in judgment on what my opinions are going to be. But I default to what has Joe Biden ever negotiated that's actually worked out.
Look, I'm not going to get into a political debate. I think a lot of people would make other arguments on his behalf, but I don't work for him. But I go back to the question, do you trust Kevin McCarthy on doing this negotiating or not?
Of course. I think he's going to do a good job for our conference in getting the best thing possible for the American people.
All right,
but hold on, real quick, Chuck.
Chuck.
Let's not leave out Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer's been out there running his mouth, talking about how our plan was dead on arrival. But I'll ask you, Chuck, do you have 50 votes or 60 votes for a clean debt ceiling? The answer is no. You don't have those votes. If you had them, you would have brought it already. So I think it's time for Chuck Schumer, Kevin McCarthy, Joe Biden to get in a room, sit down, and figure out ways that we can actually responsibly take care of our spending and then also raise the debt ceiling, because the markets will tell you it's not just Congress's ability to raise the debt ceiling, it's Congress's ability to get their fiscal house in order in the short, intermediate, and long term.
Are you comfortable if a clean debt ceiling vote were put on the House floor? Because a clean debt ceiling vote probably would pass with a handful of Republicans and Democrats. Would you, if a majority of the House voted for a clean debt ceiling, what's wrong with that? Are you comfortable with seeing if that vote could happen?
No, I am not comfortable with that whatsoever. And the reason is very clear, very simple. We are running up debts faster than we'll have any ability in a very short while to ever pay them down. That imperils the United States economy long term. Look at what's happening around the globe. China is trying to negotiate around the U.S. dollar with other countries. They're trying to remove us from currency reserve status in the world. That's a major issue for our country. So why would a member of Congress, from any party for that matter, vote for a clean debt ceiling? When Joe Biden made that statement, it was just ridiculous, ignoring the fiscal and economic realities that we face as a nation.
Let me ask you a question about Disney. How would you handle this Disney situation going forward?
Well, look, for me, I think the original hand slap that happened last legislative session, I thought was appropriate. Disney had stepped into some areas that, frankly, was none of their business. I know that people are allowed to comment, but it's not just about commenting on politics. They were trying to use their corporate weight, their corporate pressure against the state legislature and against the governor, and they, frankly, didn't read the law. So they messed around and played in a game that they had no business in. So I think for me, that's where I would have left it, and I would have moved on. There are other machinations that are going on right now between Disney and the governor. We'll see where it lands.
So you think that there's a point where you don't necessarily use government to retaliate against a corporation?
Listen, you're talking to a member of Congress who is admonishing Democrats from trying to stop them from admonishing energy companies from spending money talking about climate change. And so that happened right here in Washington, D.C. I do not think that members of Congress or any state body should be wielding large amounts of political power against a entity. I don't believe that. But again, there's a lot of stuff that's been going on between Disney and between the governor, so we got to let this thing play out a little bit.
Congressman Byron Donalds, I have a lot more for you, but I'm running up against the clock here. I hope to talk to you soon again. Thanks for your time.
Sure, anytime.